What if I told you that one of the most sophisticated military networks on the planet operates almost entirely in the shadows, with no official budget, no public accountability, and no single commander that any foreign intelligence agency has ever been able to fully track? What if I told you that this force has successfully struck targets in over a dozen countries without ever formally declaring war? And what if the nation that built this machine is the same one the world has been watching, debating, and underestimating for decades? In the next few minutes, you are going to see something that most defense analysts spend their entire careers trying to piece together. Stay with me, because what comes next will completely change how you see the Middle East. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Iran. The name alone carries weight. It carries history, tension, and an almost magnetic kind of geopolitical gravity. Whenever something explodes in the region, literally or diplomatically, Iran's name surfaces within hours. And yet, for all the coverage, for all the satellite imagery and think tank reports and Pentagon briefings, most people still cannot answer one basic question. How does Iran's military actually work? Not the surface level version, not the parades and the propaganda, the real version. The version that keeps American generals awake at night and that has reshaped the battlefield from Yemen to Syria to Iraq to the waters of the Persian Gulf. That is exactly what we are going to break down today, layer by layer, secret by secret. Let's start with something that most people get completely wrong. When you say Iran's military, people picture a conventional army, tanks, jets, soldiers in uniform. And yes, Iran has all of that. But that conventional force, known as the Artesh, the regular Iranian army, is almost secondary to the real power structure. Iran operates what military scholars call a dual military system, and understanding that duality is the key to understanding everything else. Two parallel armed forces exist simultaneously, and they do not share equal power. One answers to the president. The other answers only to the supreme leader. And the one that answers to the supreme leader is the one that changes history. That force is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. And before we go any further, I need you to understand just how different this organization is from anything most Western countries have ever encountered. The IRGC was not created to defend Iran's borders. It was created in 1979 specifically to defend the Islamic Revolution itself, the ideology, the theocracy, the supreme leader's absolute authority. That mandate gives it a mission that goes far beyond conventional warfare. The IRGC controls Iran's ballistic missile program. It controls Iran's naval operations in the Persian Gulf. It runs an intelligence apparatus that rivals the CIA in regional reach. It commands a network of proxy forces across 7 countries. And it operates a secretive special operations division called the Quds Force, a unit so deeply embedded in the fabric of Middle Eastern conflicts that removing it would cause the entire regional chessboard to collapse overnight. Now here is where it gets truly extraordinary. The Quds Force, and pay close attention here, is not a military unit in the traditional sense. It is a projection tool, a foreign policy weapon that operates without paperwork, without declarations, and without the constraints that bind conventional armies. When Iran wants to influence events in Lebanon, the Quds Force does not send uniformed soldiers. It sends advisors, weapons, cash, and ideology. When Iran wants to threaten American forces in Iraq, it does not launch missiles from Iranian soil. It activates militia networks that have been cultivated for decades. When a target needs to disappear, a dissident, an Israeli operative, a rival intelligence asset, the Quds Force's networks can reach into Europe, South America, and Southeast Asia with chilling efficiency. This is not speculation. This is documented. This is what Western intelligence agencies have been tracking, often one step behind, for 30 years. But wait, because we haven't even gotten to the most alarming part yet. Stay with me. The IRGC is not just a military force. It is an economic empire. Estimates from economists and sanctions investigators suggest that IRGC affiliated entities control somewhere between 20 and 40% of Iran's entire economy. Construction, oil, telecommunications, import-export networks, even parts of Iran's automobile industry. This gives the IRGC a self-sustaining financial base that makes international sanctions far less effective than policymakers in Washington and Brussels would like to admit. While Iran's civilian economy has suffered enormously under sanctions pressure, the IRGC has consistently found ways to fund itself through smuggling networks, front companies, cryptocurrency, and the revenues of proxy operations in countries where it effectively controls territory and resources. When you sanction a country and the military gets richer anyway, you have a problem with no easy solution. Now let's talk about the missiles, because this is where Iran's military truly separates itself from regional competitors. Iran has spent 40 years building what is now widely considered the largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. This was not an accident. It was a deliberate strategic choice made in the aftermath of the Iran-Iraq War, when Iranian commanders watched Saddam Hussein's Soviet-supplied Scud missiles rain down on Iranian cities while the world did nothing. The lesson Iran's leadership took from that war was brutal and clear. You must be able to threaten your enemies at a distance, or they will never respect you. And so Iran built and built. And today, Iran's missile inventory includes short-range ballistic missiles capable of hitting targets throughout the Gulf region, medium-range systems that can reach Israel, U.S. bases in the region, and even parts of Eastern Europe, and a growing family of precision-guided munitions that have demonstrated alarming accuracy in recent strikes. In January 2020, following the U.S. killing of Quds Force Commander Qasem Soleimani, Iran launched over a dozen ballistic missiles at U.S.-occupied Ain al-Assad air base in Iraq. The strikes were not random. They were precise. They were a message delivered in fire. Iran can hit what it aims at, and next time, it may choose not to give advance warning. This is the moment where we need to pause and address the drone program, because if the missiles are Iran's sword, the drones are its shadow army. Iran's UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle, program has become one of the most consequential military developments of the past decade. Not because Iranian drones are the most technologically advanced in the world. They are not. But because Iran has mastered the art of producing effective, affordable, and exportable drone systems at a scale that no other regional power has matched. The Shahed 136, a loitering munition sometimes called a kamikaze drone, became globally infamous when Russia began deploying Iranian-supplied versions of it against Ukrainian cities in 2022. That single fact tells you everything you need to know about the reach of Iran's military influence. An Iranian drone, designed in Tehran, manufactured in Iranian factories, ending up in the hands of Russian forces on a European battlefield. The lines between regional conflict and global conflict have never been blurrier, and we still haven't discussed the most controversial element of Iran's military posture, the one that every diplomat dances around, the one that every intelligence estimate includes in its worst-case scenarios. You already know what it is. Keep watching. Iran's nuclear program is the ghost that haunts every strategic calculation in the region. Iran insists its nuclear program is peaceful. The International Atomic Energy Agency has repeatedly documented enrichment levels that have no civilian justification. As of the most recent verified assessments, Iran has enriched uranium to levels approaching weapons grade and has accumulated stockpiles that, according to multiple independent analyses, could theoretically be converted into enough fissile material for multiple nuclear devices within a matter of months. If the decision to do so were made, Iran has not made that decision, or at least no one can confirm that it has. And that ambiguity, that deliberate, carefully maintained ambiguity, is itself a strategic weapon. The possibility of a nuclear-armed Iran shapes every negotiation, every military calculation, every arms deal in the region. Iran does not need to test a bomb to benefit from the threat of one. Now let's pull back and look at the bigger picture, the concept that military strategists call the axis of resistance. This is Iran's most important strategic achievement, and it is almost entirely invisible to the casual observer. Over 4 decades, Iran has built, funded, armed, and trained a network of non-state military organizations spread across the Arab world that collectively form a strategic buffer zone and a forward deployment capability that no conventional military spending could replicate. Hezbollah in Lebanon, with an estimated 150,000 rockets and missiles, is the crown jewel of this network, widely considered a more capable military force than the armies of most Arab states. The Houthi movement in Yemen has demonstrated the ability to strike targets deep inside Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and to threaten international shipping in the Red Sea with drone and missile attacks that have disrupted global trade routes. Iraqi Shia militias, collectively known as the Popular Mobilization Forces, have become a semi-official part of Iraq's security structure while maintaining operational loyalty to Tehran. Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza receives Iranian weapons and funding. Syrian government forces have been kept alive by Iranian military intervention and Hezbollah fighters throughout the country's devastating civil war. This network, built over decades at an estimated cost of hundreds of millions to low billions of dollars annually, gives Iran the ability to threaten Israel from multiple directions simultaneously, to place U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria under constant threat without direct confrontation, to close the Strait of Hormuz at will and disrupt 20% of global oil supply, and to credibly threaten the survival of Gulf Arab monarchies without firing a single missile from Iranian soil. It is the most cost-effective strategic deterrence architecture ever assembled by a non-superpower. And it works precisely because Iran understands something that its adversaries are still struggling to fully accept. In the 21st century, you do not need to win wars. You only need to make them too expensive for your enemies to start. Let's talk about Iran's navy, because this is an area that rarely gets the attention it deserves and where the gap between perception and reality is widest. Iran operates 2 separate naval forces. The conventional Iranian Navy handles blue water operations, with frigates and submarines operating in the Gulf of Oman and beyond. But the IRGC Navy, operating in the shallow, strategically vital waters of the Persian Gulf, is the one that keeps U.S. Fifth Fleet commanders perpetually on edge. IRGC naval doctrine is built around what military theorists call swarm tactics, the use of large numbers of small, fast, heavily armed speedboats that can overwhelm a larger adversary through sheer volume and unpredictability. When Iranian speedboats approach U.S. warships in the Gulf, the encounters are not random acts of bravado. They are training exercises, data collection, stress tests of American rules of engagement. Every interaction is studied, recorded, and fed back into Iranian tactical planning. The IRGC Navy also maintains a fleet of midget submarines, underwater drones, and mine-laying capabilities specifically designed for one scenario: closing the Strait of Hormuz. The strait, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, carries approximately 1/5 of the world's oil supply. Iran has invested decades in developing the precise capabilities needed to make that passage untenable in a conflict scenario. Not permanently, not even for long, but long enough to cause oil prices to spike, global markets to panic, and any adversary to recalculate whether the military objective they were pursuing was worth the economic catastrophe it triggered. Here is something that should genuinely alarm you. And I don't say that lightly. Iran's cyber warfare program is among the top 5 most capable state-sponsored programs on the planet. This is not hyperbole. This is the consensus assessment of U.S. Cyber Command, the NSA, and allied intelligence agencies. Iran's cyber units, operating under both military and intelligence structures, have demonstrated the ability to penetrate critical infrastructure networks in the United States, Israel, Saudi Arabia, and across Europe. The Shamoon virus that destroyed 35,000 computers at Saudi Aramco in 2012. The attack on the Sands Casino in Las Vegas in 2014. The 2021 cyber attack that temporarily disrupted fuel distribution networks in a neighboring adversary state. The ongoing campaigns against Israeli water treatment facilities and power grids. These are not the operations of a technologically backward regional power. These are the operations of a state that has made cyber warfare a central pillar of its national security strategy, a force multiplier that costs a fraction of conventional weapons while potentially achieving strategic effects that missiles cannot. Now, let's address the question that everyone watching this is inevitably thinking: with all of this capability, all of this strategic depth, all of this investment in deterrence and power projection, why hasn't Iran used it all at once? Why hasn't it struck decisively? The answer is one of the most sophisticated aspects of Iranian strategic culture, and it is rooted in a concept called strategic patience. Iranian decision-making is not impulsive. It is deeply historical, shaped by a 500-year-old civilization that has been invaded, occupied, and humiliated by foreign powers more times than most nations have existed. The Islamic Republic's leadership believes, with genuine conviction, that time is on its side, that America will eventually tire of the region, that Israel's internal contradictions will eventually destabilize it, that the Arab monarchies of the Gulf are structurally fragile, that Europe will eventually choose economic engagement over strategic solidarity with Washington. Strategic patience means accepting short-term pain in exchange for long-term positioning. It means never giving your adversary the clean, decisive confrontation they are preparing for, because that confrontation would play to their strengths. It means fighting everywhere, but fighting nowhere in a way that justifies a full-scale response. It is a strategy that is extraordinarily difficult to counter, and one that Iran has executed with remarkable consistency for 4 decades. Let's bring this home to what it means for the world right now, today, because this is not abstract history. Iran's military machine is actively shaping events in real time. Houthi missile and drone attacks on Red Sea shipping have forced global logistics companies to reroute cargo around Africa, adding weeks to transit times and billions to supply chain costs. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq and Syria continue to harass U.S. forces on a near-daily basis, creating a constant low-grade conflict that ties down American military resources and political attention. Hezbollah sits on Israel's northern border with a weapons stockpile that independent analysts describe as larger than most European NATO members' entire arsenals. Iran's nuclear enrichment continues beneath hardened, buried facilities that military planners in both Israel and the United States acknowledge would be extremely difficult to destroy comprehensively in any airstrike scenario. The situation is not frozen, it is not stable, it is an extremely complex, extremely volatile strategic environment that is moving, and the direction it moves in the coming years will affect everyone watching this video, regardless of where in the world you are. What makes Iran's military machine truly extraordinary and truly dangerous is not any single weapon or any single capability. It is the integration. The way the missile program deters conventional attack, the way the proxy network extends Iran's reach without exposing Iran to direct retaliation, the way the nuclear program casts a shadow over every strategic calculation, the way the cyber program undermines adversaries without triggering the kinetic response, that conventional attacks would provoke. The way the economic empire funds the whole system regardless of what the outside world does. These are not separate programs. They are a single, coherent strategy designed by people who have studied their adversaries carefully, who understand their own vulnerabilities and strengths with unsentimental clarity, and who have proven decade after decade that they are willing to absorb enormous pressure in pursuit of long-term strategic goals. This is not the military machine of a rogue state stumbling toward catastrophe. This is the military machine of a civilization state with a coherent worldview, a long historical memory, and a very clear set of objectives: regional dominance, deterrence against existential threats, the eventual departure of American military power from the Middle East, and the survival of the Islamic Republic itself. Whether you see Iran as a threat, a rival, or a rational actor operating in an extraordinarily difficult environment, the one thing you cannot afford to do is underestimate it. The countries and commanders that have underestimated Iran's military machine have consistently been surprised, sometimes catastrophically. The world is entering a period of accelerating tension in the Middle East. New alliances are forming, new weapons are being deployed, new red lines are being drawn and tested. The decisions made in Tehran, Washington, Tel Aviv, and Riyadh in the coming months will have consequences that echo for a generation. And at the center of all of it, as it has been for 40 years, is Iran's secret military machine operating in the shadows, building its strength, watching, waiting, and moving in ways that the world is only beginning to fully understand. Do not look away. Do not assume this is someone else's problem. Stay alert, stay informed, because in the world we are now living in, understanding how power really works is not just an intellectual exercise. It is survival. If this video opened your eyes to something you didn't fully understand before, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps more people find this content. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because the developments we are tracking are moving fast, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Share this with someone who needs to understand what is really happening in the world, and drop your thoughts in the comments. What surprised you most? What do you think the world gets most wrong about Iran's military? We read every comment. We'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp.